and welcome back to the workshop. In today's episode, we're going to be digging into a project that I personally, and this is just me, am very excited about. We're going to be building a very fancy, very cool chef's knife with a very special Damascus pattern. I originally started thinking about how to build this pattern 2.5 years ago when I was visiting my friend Jordan Lamotte in India. I saw a lot of geometric patterns in their stonework and their tile work and stuff like that. And one of the patterns that I kept on seeing was a lotus flower. And it just kind of got my brain ticking about how I could put that into a block of steel. And today we're gonna get started on actually making that happen. Now, this pattern is gonna have quite a bit of solid 15N20 as the main element for the petals of the flower. And so we're gonna get started by welding up a big old block of just solid 15N20 that we can then process down and forge into the actual shapes that we wanna get to. We're gonna get this welded up. I'm thinking I might cut these in half and stack them up a little taller to make it a little easier to draw out. And before we do that, before we start chopping this up in the bandsaw, we're gonna light the forge and get going so that by the time this is cut and welded, it's ready to throw on in. We're gonna cut these into 4 by 3. It's 4 inches wide, 6 inches long right now. And we're gonna cut it in halvesies. I wanna have a lot of this steel left over. You kind of run into the problem in the past where you spend like a lot of time working on a really cool pattern and then you end up with like almost none of it left by the time you're done. You will end up with enough for like one knife. But this is gonna be a very versatile element to be able to add in to stuff in the future, and so I want to make sure that I have plenty of it. Because we're going into the bandsaw and it has a rotating vise on it, we got to put a block in the back of the vise that it actually clamps square on all these pieces. Okay, so basically the way that we're gonna start this is with 2 main elements. This is what we wanna end up with. This is the lotus flower. You can see that it has 6 petals on the inside and 6 petals on the outside. And I wanted to make sure that I had good material flow kind of going between the two so that it looked natural, it looked like it was overlaying, and that's kind of a hard thing to do. The way that I figured out to do it, start off with these 2 patterns. One that's gonna be the bottom leaf, the other part is gonna be the top leaf. And so for the bottom leaf, what we're gonna do, once we have this forged solid, use that solid stock for 1 solid chunk here, then we're gonna space it out with a line of 1080 and then more solid 15N20 on the other side. What that's gonna do is after we forge weld it together, we'll get to here, just 1 line running through, little white on either side. Then we're gonna forge it round, and then we're gonna forge it on the 45. So these corners will become the new flat areas, and that will bend this layer and make it so that that black layer is kind of going, cutting off one of those corners there. What that's gonna mean is that then we can take 2 of those blocks, move it down here. It'll be white, bright steel in here, bright steel on the outside, and we're gonna have it separated out. Also at this stage, I'm gonna forge weld on a couple more pieces of 1080 to give us that kind of shadow line, and that'll be the main element for the bottom parts of the petals. For the upper part, it's a little simpler. We're gonna take that solid 15N20 and we're gonna weld some heavy 1080 on either side, forge weld it together to get to this. Then we're just gonna crush it down into a C shape. It's the basis for like a W's pattern, and it kind of bows in these side layers. So once we get here, then all we have to do is stack this on top of those 2 blocks. The material from the bottom of this element lines up, and it kind of gives us that flow where it looks like that top petal is tucking underneath the bottom petals. I think I'm also gonna have to grind off the corners before we again do a re-square on it, and that'll give us this element right here. So we've got our 2 bottom petals. It's only half of a petal. They'll make a full petal after we take this square, crush it into a rhombus shape. And there, all we do is we take 6 of those elements. It basically will be one of these guys. We'll stack up 6 of those and 6 rhombuses of pure 1080 steel. We're gonna add another little bit of insulating 1080 around the outside, and then forge weld that whole thing together, and that will give us our final Lotus shape. This keeps it nice and simple. It's only a couple of forge welds to get to that Lotus, and that Lotus is not going to be the only steel that we're doing for this project. We've got some other stuff that we're going to do to make it really interesting. I think this could be a little boring. You could do like a hexagon layout and just have a bunch of Lotuses, and that would probably look all right. For now, let's get that 15 and 20 crushed down into 2-inch by 1-inch bar stock. Okay, so we got the bar cooled down now, 2 inches by 1 inch, just right. I'm just gonna grind the whole thing. It's gonna be easier to process that way. I'm gonna slap it in the big old bench vise in there first, dust it off with a big angle grinder, and then take it to the belt sander and just get both sides flat. I will very lightly clean off the edges. They don't need to be super clean. That will come after the next welding process. And while we were waiting for it to cool down, I figured out the math on how I want to chop this up to make it work for the next restack. All right, now that we've got it cleaned up, with the exception of these couple little dots right here, I'm not worried about those. We'll make those outside portions of the next bar. Now, I also have this 1080 that just so happens to be 2 inches wide. This 2 inches is wider than that 2 inches. We'll weld it together, about 19 inches of usable clearance. It's 2.71 inches, which means it will cut it with the curve of the blade to about 2 5/8 inches long, and then we'll stack it up sideways like this with our 1080 in there for the pieces that we want. All right. What I need to decide now is whether or not I want to put 1 or 2 pieces of 1080 in this element. 2 seems like it's going to be thick, but this element when it's done is going to be like 3/8 of an inch round. It's going to be tiny. I know you'll still be able to see the line if it's only this thick. I think that I'd probably better put 2 pieces in there. So we got our 2 billets ready to weld up then. I'm going to put welds along this face right here, and then we'll grind down the fresh 1080 until it's flat with these edges. Then they'll go back in the forge. We'll forge weld them together. I think I'll forge weld this one to 2 inches by 1 inch, and I'll bring this down to 1 inch square. And then remember that I need to round them both out and make C's out of this, and I need to round this one out and then forge it on the 45 so I get that bend in my layer the way that I need it. It's going to be really embarrassing if I forget to do that. Wouldn't be the first time that I've spent time on a piece of Damascus and then squished it the wrong way. I wish it was. Okay, so I let the bars cool down in the forge overnight, so they should be relatively soft. Probably not super soft, but soft enough to chop up in the banded saw. What we're gonna do is figure out where on this bar we get into true pattern. Basically, the end of the bar, because we did so much manipulation to it, is smooshed out. You can see that this line right here, that's a weld, that's the 1080 on the outside of the bar. This is the bar that's just kind of that C shape, so it's 15 and 20 in the middle with 1080 on the outside. So we're gonna cut it right here, and then we're gonna cut it probably about right here. That's where I see it starting to look uniform throughout the rest of the bar. You can see that that 1080 line kind of follows a bit of a funky pattern along here. So it's not totally straight, but it's pretty close. And especially when we get to the point that it's reduced down a ton into like a tiny little 3/8 inch round, it should look pretty good. I forged down these bars pretty carefully yesterday. Doing a really aggressive heats under the hammer can cause this type of line. So hopefully that bar is nice and uniform throughout. We'll cut off our ends at the true material and see where it's lining up. We'll cut this one too. Also, I'm not liking that I can see multiple different pieces of steel in here. If that's the case, we're gonna have to start over, which sucks. Well, shoot, let's get to chopping and then we'll make a call from there. We're just gonna polish up this end and have a look at the end grain. So just really fast in the grinding room. Into a little bit of gator piss. Crap, oh my gosh. Oh, that's so frustrating. All right, so that's my bad, guys. This stuff that was on the outside that I thought was all 15 and 20 because the top piece said 15 and 20, turns out it was stacked up to be a production billet, so it was not a solid 15 and 20. Now we've got some other fun steel to play with. In the meantime, we do have a bunch of other 1080, 15 and 20 back there that will stack up into the billet to restart. Sick. Oh my gosh. Before we get going on this, I'm not super happy with the distortion that I got out of this bar. I want the line in this bar, that 1080 line, this is the one that we added, and it goes like this right now. That is not what a Lotus flower looks like. That's terrible. I want it to go like that. So let's get these guys cleaned up, welded up. We're gonna light the forge before we do any of that so that it's nice and hot by the time we're ready to forge weld. Having a hot forge for forge welding is kind of the only way to do it. So I forged this thing in a little bit of a funky shape in order so that we might have a funky line on the inside. So what I'm gonna do now is chop off the end of this bar. This bar is so long, I'm not gonna try and weld up a mosaic billet that's like this long. I think what I'm gonna do is try and do it in 2 different billets. So theoretically we'll try it on one. If something goes horribly wrong, we have more material to try it out with again. Now I'm not seeing where that line kind of starts to flow in. I think it's around right here. So I'm gonna chop it a good ways back. If it's looking good, then we'll clean off, we'll chop this bar in half and clean off the faces and then weld our 1080 on the outside to give that shadow effect that we need. And if it's not looking good, then we'll heat it back up and try once more. That is not good. I thought based off of this that I had kept it pretty in line in the way that I wanted to, but I wonder if the end of the bar just didn't move in the exact same way as the center of it. Let's chop this thing in half and see if it's any different. Maybe this is still some weirdness from the end of the bar, but I kind of don't think so. Well, the good news is that so far we've only wasted hundreds of dollars of material, so. All right, guys, drop your predictions down below whether or not I biffed it. Spoiler alert, I biffed it. Okay, I think that I have a more definitive and repeatable or insurable plan of action. But I think that that's it for today's episode. Before I end it, I want to show you guys the final plan for what this knife is hopefully going to end up looking like. So this is the plan. Polka dots. The smaller dots will hopefully be this Lotus flower, and the bigger dots are going to be a lily pad steel that I drew up that hopefully I can make work, but after all of this fuss, who knows. The handle of the knife, it's going to be an integral bolster with some Lotus petals carved in the handle. The same profile as these knives that we just tested. You guys probably saw that video, but if you didn't, you should check it out. But yeah, it'll basically be a full custom version with a bunch of plug welds of Lotus steel and lily pad steel. It should be super visually stunning, very cool, very unique, unlike anything I've ever seen before, and it should be a lot of fun if we can ever make any of this work. So thank you guys so much for following along. Thank you to our patrons for patronizing us. Thank you to all of our wonderful viewers. If you want to help support the channel, you can go on to Stelter MFG, pick you up a lovely leather patch hat or a ashtray or a bottle opener or something like that. Really helps us out in pursuing doing more fun production, both of custom stuff and of neat forged items that you can't really find anywhere else. Thanks guys, see ya.